Hey guys, today I'm going to be reviewing a Debian-based Linux distribution called MX Linux. It is based on Debian's stable branch. MX Linux is a new Linux distribution. It's only been around about 3 years, 2 or 3 years. It is a continuation of the former MEPIS project and also the AntiX Linux distro. So it's a collaborative effort between those two communities. I used AntiX a couple of times in the past. I quite liked AntiX. I never used MEPIS, but for those of you that have been around Linux for a while, you will remember the old MEPIS Linux distro. So it's cool that those two communities have merged forces and have created MX Linux. MX Linux was so named because M is the first letter of MEPIS and X is the last letter of AntiX. Okay, so I'm going to be installing MX Linux 17. This is beta 1. This beta was released about a week ago. So I'm going to, let's see if it loads into a live environment here. Okay, so it's loading up a live environment, and it looks like the live environment, the VirtualBox guest editions work out of the box. The wallpaper was a little buggy, but it looks like it corrected itself, so that's pretty cool. We have our little greeter here, MX17 Horizon. I guess Horizon is the code name for this particular version of MX Linux. We have links to a user manual, to their wiki, to tools, to tweak, which I'm assuming is like system settings and such, to their forums. We have videos. We have a button to contribute. I guess how to contribute time, money, whatever to the project. Popular apps, so Software Center, I'm assuming that would launch. And I need to find the installer and go ahead and run through the install. The installer, it looks like, is right here on the desktop. Let me go ahead and click that. Alright, we have some terms of use here. You don't see that too often in Linux installs. Basically, the terms of use, there's no real terms here. Just a quick little blurb about MX Linux, how it's a continuation of the old MEPIS Linux, which was released under the Apache free license. Some MEPIS components have been modified for MX Linux. So it's just some legal jargon of how MX Linux used to be MEPIS. And continuing on, disk installation. I created a 15 gig VirtualBox virtual machine here. It's going to install to the entire 15 gig disk. So I'm going to choose next. It's going to warn me that it's about to write to the disk, about to format this 15 gig virtual hard drive. I'm going to choose yes. And just like that, the installation is starting. Now, normally, before you get to the point where you're formatting a disk and installing stuff, they've already asked you questions about keyboard layout, language, creating a username and password, sometimes setting up a system administrator password. We really didn't get any of that in this install process, so that's kind of interesting. But anyway, I'm going to let the install run. I'll be back in a second. Okay, that little install process took about 5 minutes. Now we come to selecting our boot method. I guess it needs to install a bootloader. Install grub for MX Linux and Windows. I'm not sure why it has and Windows here. There's nothing on this drive on this virtual machine. So anyway, I'm going to install the master boot record. I'm going to click next. Okay to install grub bootloader to SDA? Yes, it's okay. Looks like that'll take a minute or two. Alright, so that just took about a minute. Then we have computer network names that it's already chosen MX1, a computer domain. I'm really just going to leave that as example.dom here in this virtual machine. The name of the work group is just work group, I guess. So I'm just going to leave all that as what it is chosen. Samba server for MS networking, it's ticked on. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it ticked on. Localization. So we have our US keyboard, English US as our locale, that's all correct. System clock uses local. Yeah, sure, why not? I'm going to tick that on. Time zone, I need America and Chicago. I'm not in Chicago, but I am in the Central Time Zone. Chicago is also in the Central Time Zone. Alright, now we've come to creating our username. I'm just going to choose MX Linux. Default password. Very simple password that I can remember. Then we need to create a root password. Basically, this is the system administration password. Alright, do I want to encrypt home directory? No, not for this virtual machine anyway. Auto login? No, I hate auto login. I want to be asked a password. Save live desktop changes? I'm going to leave all this ticked off. And it looks like the installation process is complete. Now we need to reboot the machine to complete the installation. I'll be right back. And I just rebooted the machine. And let's check out our freshly installed MX Linux. And let's see how fast the boot up time is. Still waiting. Okay. Alright, we got to a login manager pretty fast there actually. That might have took 10 seconds, maybe 15 at the most. That wasn't too bad. And let's log in. This is the XFCE desktop environment. I didn't mention that before, but MX Linux uses the XFCE desktop environment. Looks like by default we have some system monitoring information up here. This is actually a small lightweight program called Conky that actually runs on your desktop here, displaying time, date, disk space, memory, CPU usage. So that's pretty cool that they have that installed and running by default. In the greeter, user manual. Let me go ahead and check out their user manual. So looks like it is a PDF file that is 174 pages long. So that's pretty cool. That's a pretty substantial user manual there for MX Linux. Great for novices to read through. I have a link to their wiki. I haven't checked out their wiki before. Tools. Let's see. This is our, I guess, like system settings menu here. We have options for live USB making to, create a thumb drive. We have our snapshot utility. Now that is interesting. Create a live ISO snapshot of your running system. I really like that is here by default. Not too many distros have something like that on their system by default, but it's really nice to be able to create a live snapshot of your system for backup purposes. Maintenance, you have boot repair, menu editor, user manager. Then under setup we have our NVIDIA driver installer, codecs installer, Conky, network assistance, sounds, tweaks. Let's see what the tweak tool is. Your current panel settings have been backed up in a hidden folder called .restore in your home folder. And I'm not sure why it warned me that, but I guess if for some reason when I'm going through these tweaks, if I break something, it's letting me know there is a backup. So that's pretty cool. So it looks like the tweak tool would let me move the XFCE panel, around the screen. If I didn't like it on the left side, I can move it top, bottom, maybe right. Although I really hate right side panels. They don't make any sense on the right side of the screen. The left I don't mind, but since it's here by default, I'm going to leave it there. We have some theming options. It looks like we have the option between a light theme and a dark theme. So the light theme, if I hit apply, it really doesn't change anything over here. Let me open up a file manager so you can see the changes. The MX17 dark theme, let me hit apply on it. I really like dark themes. The only problem with a dark theme is you really need a light wallpaper if you're going to use a dark theme, and vice versa. If you use a light theme, you want a dark wallpaper. So I may have to check out what wallpapers they have available. So let me right click on the desktop, and I'm going to go to desktop settings, and this gets me to the wallpaper setting. I accidentally closed that. Anyway, let me resize this window if I can. Some of these screen edges are really tight, and I'm looking for a light colored wallpaper to contrast with my dark theme. Actually, all of these wallpapers are pretty dark. Probably the lightest one would be this thing here. It's not a very attractive wallpaper in my opinion. You know what, that one will work. Let me close that out. Yeah, I like that. So yeah, that actually looks pretty sharp there. And the khaki colors actually work with that wallpaper. It really didn't work with that really dark wallpaper that was installed by default, especially the black lettering. They really should have picked a different color if they were going to use that default wallpaper. It's a minor thing, you know, default wallpapers in Linux distros, but to the casual Linux user, stuff like that does matter. I'm going to very quickly go through the default programs installed by default in MX Linux. So under accessories, we have our application finder. So basically this helps you find all of the installed programs on the system. I could actually use that to do what I'm about to do in this menu, but I'm going to go through the menu here. We have our archive manager for archived files, you know, zip, unzip, that sort of thing. We have a bulk renaming utility for renaming files. We have the Catfish file search. We have Clipit, which is a clipboard manager. We have, of course, Conky. Again, Conky is this little system monitoring information displayed at the top of the screen here. Featherpad, which is a lightweight Qt text editor. We also have Calculator, GTK hash. We have our LightDM greetings, greeter settings. It uses the LightDM login manager. So Lucky Backup is a backup and sync your data with the power of rsync. So that's pretty cool. Again, it's not something you see in a lot of distros. You know, an easy way to back up your system, but MX Linux has a few utilities installed by default to make backups, you know, pretty easy for you guys. Midnight Commander is a file manager. It is a terminal-based file manager. That's kind of an odd thing to have installed by default, but okay. I mean, I like Midnight Commander. It's just not something you would expect to see in a graphical desktop environment like XFCE. I don't know how many users are really going to use something like Midnight Commander. Alright, we have our note-taking utility. We have Orage Global Time, shows clocks from different countries. We have our password and key utility, screenshot utility. We have sensor viewer, I'm assuming showing system information. Task manager, see what task manager we're using. I'm sure it's the standard one for XFCE. My brain's not working today, guys. Alright, education. We have LibreOffice Math installed. Under games, we have a few different games. We have Solitaire, Chromium, BSU, Hearts, Mahjong, and a couple others. Graphics, we have GIMP, the GNU Image Manipulation Program, or GIMP. Very, very nice graphics editing program. GScan 2 PDF program. GThumb, which is a image organizer, kind of a photo organizer. LibreOffice Draw. Under Internet, we have Firefox as our default browser. We have the GNOME PPP, which is a dial-up tool. That's an interesting choice. HexChat, chat with other people online. Thunderbird Mail. Not a lot of people use desktop mail anymore. Most people use webmail, but I don't mind including Thunderbird Mail on the ISO. Transmission for our BitTorrent client. Multimedia. We have Asunder CD Ripper. How many people have CDs anymore? Everything's digital. How often does anybody need to rip a CD anymore? So that's a strange one to include by default too. I really think that's a waste of space on the ISO. Clementine, a fantastic music player. One of the best, really. Fully functional music player. Clementine is just awesome. Also under multimedia, we have GMTP, which is an MTP client for MP3 players. We have GUVC View, which is, you see this window that I am currently in? This is GUVC View running on my main machine. It allows me to record my camera here. That's another odd one to put on the ISO. I don't know how many people would need something like that. Pulse audio, volume control, SM2, VLC, which is a fantastic video player. Actually, just multimedia player in general. You can actually play music in it too. VLC is very nice. And XFburn is our disk burning utility. Under MX tools, we have a lot of, MX specific stuff, like for settings and drivers, menu editors, and such, tweak tools. Under Office, we have Dictionary, we have an ebook reader, and it looks like we have the entire LibreOffice suite. We have a calendar, some PDF stuff. Under Settings, we have Accessibility, we have Adobe Flash Player. People still use Flash. I thought that thing died by now. We have Alternative Configurator, which is configure the system default alternatives. Okay. We have some Bluetooth stuff. We have configuring our desktop. We have firewall configuration, Gparted, some network tools, Power Manager, printer tools, Samba, screensaver. And that's pretty much the default programs for NX Linux. Pretty substantial suite of programs installed by default. So you can get a lot of work done with MX Linux with the programs installed by default on the ISO. For package management, I didn't mention it when I was running through the list, but Synaptic Package Manager is installed by default, which I actually really like Synaptic Package Manager. If I want a graphical interface, for installing and uninstalling programs, Synaptic Package Manager is one of the best out there. It's not installed on a lot of systems anymore by default, but I usually install it on every machine that I run. The other thing I didn't look at was the terminal that they're using by default. It is the XFCE terminal. That's what I assume. This is the XFCE desktop environment after all. I'm going to do a quick update here. So I'm going to run sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. This beta 1 was released about a week ago. Let's see what kind of updates I need to run. So we have some repo information here. It's using the Debian stretch repos. It also has an MX repo here. But I've been waiting for about 1 minute now, and it says waiting for headers, and it's not moving from 0%. So trying to run a apt update and apt upgrade from the terminal is not working here. So let me see if I can run an update from one of the update managers that MX Linux has installed by default. So I've got this little icon here, this opened box here. Let's see, view and upgrade. Let me choose that and see what happens. Okay. Let me reload this and see. And it's the same thing. I get to 0%, waiting for headers, and it looks like it hangs here a little bit. Well, I hate to leave a review on a negative note. Let me play around a couple of minutes off camera and I'll see what the issue is. Anyway, I spent about a minute or two seeing what's going on here, running it as sudo, then just switching over to the SU account, the super user account, and nothing's happening. It freezes right here. I'm assuming what it is a mirror down, maybe a really slow mirror or just a mirror that's completely down. So that'll probably take care of itself. It'll resolve itself. I can probably come back tomorrow, run an update, and that mirror will be back up and I'll be able to update the system. So no big deal there. I won't bash on MX Linux for that. It may not even be one of their mirrors down. It could be Debian's mirrors being down for all we know. So my verdict for MX Linux, the install, A+, very straightforward, simple install. Probably from beginning to end the install took 10, maybe 12 minutes. The XFC desktop environment is the same XFCE desktop environment you guys have been playing around in for the last 4 or 5 years. Very straightforward. The suite of programs installed by default. You know, they really, it's not like a kitchen sink kind of suite of apps. It's not like they just threw everything they could on the ISO, but there's a lot of programs installed by default, and that's good. It's nice to have distros like that you can install, and you don't have to worry about afterwards installing a ton of stuff. You know, by default you have, well, as I mentioned, going through the menu, there were some questionable things that I thought were kind of odd to have on the ISO, but you know, that's not bad either. I mean, there's a role for distros like that out there. So all in all, I give MX Linux an A for sure, maybe an A plus. Really no issues. Again, that when I opened the terminal and tried to run that update, you know, it's a downed mirror. That happens with everybody, so no big deal there. Peace, guys.